Welcome to The Deepest Cut, a podcast about the movement from painful experiences to meaningful music. I'm your host, Matt Connor. At this point, I trust that we've all felt the divide, so there's really no need to go into it here. We've all experienced our share of relational fractures these days, and the resulting anxiety and confusion, the anger and isolation have left so many of us wondering how we can even find our way back to healthier connections with one another. The outrage is all around us, and it's so easy to lose our better selves as we engage with it all. Singer-songwriter Sara Groves says that it reminds her of the plague of darkness in the biblical book of Exodus, a span of time in Egypt where, quote, man could not see his brother. And in her attempts to process all of this, she penned the beautiful song, Deal Breaker. Sara's attempts to add to the beauty, which is my favorite song of hers, by the way, have been greatly appreciated over the last 25 years as a musician and performing artist, and also as the founder of Art House North in the Twin Cities area with her husband Troy. On this episode of The Deepest Cut, Sara sat down with us to talk about the worrisome shift from culture care to culture wars. And she also defines the, quote, generative life that she's been striving to embody, even as it feels more and more difficult to do so. She also takes us inside the writing of Deal Breaker as a way to hold the grief and hope at the same time. Here's what I believe to be one of our more important conversations from this podcast. We hope you join us as we sit down with Sara Groves. Hello and welcome to The Deepest Cut. My name is Matt Connor and I'm your host. I am overjoyed to be sitting here. I'm overjoyed on a melancholy podcast. I guess maybe that's an odd juxtaposition. Sara Groves is sitting across from me here, so to speak, and as a longtime fan, I am overjoyed. Sara, how are you on this Monday afternoon?
Doing great. Thank you, Matt.
So glad to have you. Sara, obviously, this is a podcast where we zero in on a specific song. We talk about the songcraft of that song. But I would like to start with you with our communication about even doing this in the first place, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Because, generally I reach out to an artist or the artist representation, however, whatever the portal is to get in to chat with an artist.
My people, my entourage.
My people got with your people and in the back and forth there. I know that you had some reservations because the hook of the podcast is artists talking about the songs that maybe were the most painful or difficult to write. And then I'm sure that can be a scary proposition. I would never know it because sometimes those artists say, no, I have no interest in talking to you about that. But you were one who said, yeah, except maybe not. And you kind of hedge there.
Well, I think your email said to talk about or unpack the hardest song. I think it said the hardest song you've ever had to write. And I felt like, well, I'm not sure I'm going to tell you or anyone about that. Not just a little bit like, none ya. That's none ya business, Matt. But that wouldn't be my heart. Obviously I'm not like a closed off person. I speak pretty openly about stuff. So I understood the intention of what you were going for, but I think I wrote you and said, that's a pretty steep ask. Yeah. So I thought, well, I can either hold my cards close to the chest and just say either no, or say yes. And then just pick a song that, that would fit the bill. But I thought it's interesting in light of of what you're doing. So I just thought, well, I'm going to tell you the truth. No, I'm probably not going to tell you about the hardest song I ever had to write. But I'd love to discuss that idea. And I'd love to discuss a song that was very difficult to write. Yes.
Let me ask you this. Is there a song that you've written and released that you would still say, I'm not discussing that one?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not what you're referencing is not this song that I wrote that I kept to myself or this thing in my journal that no one's ever heard. You're talking about even songs that people may have memorized the lyrics to. You're like, yeah, I'm not going there.
Yeah, I mean, what I think about it is that it doesn't necessarily belong to everybody. Like I'm sharing the parts that belong to us, communally or whatever that are part of, but I don't feel any sense of obligation to say everything. I am aware as I say that of the Sarah McLachlan song, Building a Mystery, about this person that is sort of like always alluding to these difficult and enigmatic trials that they're in. And so I'm not trying to do that either. I'm not trying to say, oh, I've had these really dark experiences that I'm not going to, you know, divulge like how hard it's been. Because as we talk, I think I'll unpack that idea that when I write something, it doesn't even begin to touch the difficulty in the places that it meets in other people and their stories. Like the stories I hear back about songs that are hard to write are always way more difficult and from places I couldn't even fathom. But I am like you are, Matt. I am the holder of a lot of memories and stories of other people. And if I'm going to open my whole self up to like write what's true about a thing, I have to explore all of that. I remember years ago, I think it was Jason Gray was talking about the story in when Noah's two sons go into the tent, and the one comes into the tent and witnesses his dad's sort of like destitution and nakedness, and he runs out and broadcasts his dad's nakedness to everybody. And then the other son, it does something different with that. And Jason was just saying, like, that's actually a really valid question, what we do with other people's stories. So they're not just all my stories, they're also the stories of other people. Some of them are mine, of my own, like, complete boneheadedness, and I have been, I'm chief of sinners, so I'm in there too, making poor choices or whatever. So I guess I don't feel the need to unpack all of those things. And the ones that are most difficult are tied to things and people and situations that are really, private and personal to me. But I feel like my reflections on them and reflecting honestly about life as a human being, they are going to make it in there. They're going to be in those spaces. But I don't feel an obligation to unpack all of that with everybody. Yeah, so that's it. I'm repeating myself now. I always know, Matt, when I start to repeat myself, it's time for me to stop because
Is that really the marker? You've learned that?
oh yeah, I'm a verbal processor. And if I start saying something repeating, then I think, okay, Sarah, that's let the other person talk now.
That's great. As you learn, you've been doing this for a long time, longer than most. So when you have that kind of experience, it makes me believe you've had to learn some things about how to handle the stories of others. And then and how to know how to release them. Like, what have you learned about that in your songcraft in terms of handling difficult circumstances, maybe some painful material, some vulnerable emotions, especially when they're just not your own? Do you have to hide them behind analogies and wordplay? Do you have to hedge some things?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a really funny one because I had one early on in All Right Here. I wrote a song and it involved someone else's story, and I didn't end up telling them. They approached me before I could say anything, and it actually was like kind of a reveal about them and something they'd gone through. They approached me and said, "You know who really needs to hear this song?" And they were thinking of someone completely different. And that's when I realized, oh, nobody knows. No, nobody's listening like they like, is this me? If anything, everyone thinks every song is about me. And that would be where that's also like a type of vulnerability, I guess, to say, I'm going to say this, even though that's actually not me and that's not my story. And then other things are like very much me. Sometimes I will change like a pronoun or something so that it's the story if I'm referencing like he or whatever. Maybe in the real story it was she. But I'm the only one that really knows all of that. So I wouldn't say I do a lot of that anymore. I think early on I did because I was more worried about people being hurt or whatever. Anne Lamott takes a totally different view of this. She feels like, if you did it, it's fair game, and I understand how that's why maybe I'm not writing books. I think that's a very scary prospect of writing a book. And I feel like I kind of understand why some people wait with certain stories until till they're clear to write them. Even when I read Beth Moore's autobiography, like she waited till some time, to really unpack her story and all that had happened in her life. So I understand both. I understand where Anne Lamott's coming from, and the sort of like, hey, you did that, so I'm gonna, this is a part of my truth telling, and I'm gonna put you in the book. If you didn't want it to be in there, you shouldn't have done that. Which I think is hilarious and bold. I'm not that. I'm not Anne Lamott. I'm just not wired that way. I'm very much a bridge builder. I'm very sensitive, and I care. Not that Anne Lamott doesn't care what people think, but at some level, she's got the wherewithal to, yeah, to like do her thing, and I love what she does. So, but the question about other people's stories, I really learned a lot from International Justice Mission about this, because I'd been a part of other ministries and organizations that would really like sling, they dealt in other people's stories really loosely, and even photos that they didn't know the names of the people in the photos, just that kind of thing. I think the church kind of gets into that. I grew up in a holiness movement, a Pentecostal background, and we're dealing in testimony time. I mean, that's happening. And so you have the testimonies of like the person in the airplane next to you, or the waitress that you know what I mean? You had this interaction with, or whatever. And yeah, I just think when I went to work with IJM, they do not share a photo or a story unless that person fully is aware of what's happening and has signed off on it. And that means someone around the world that doesn't even know what social media is. So they're very careful with people's stories. And I really grew up a lot when I was interfacing with them, my own ideas about that really developed quite a bit, because I realized, in fact, I had permission from a young girl that had been rescued by IJM. I used to tell her story. And as she grew up and became older, she felt called to tell her own story. And she called IJM and said, I don't want anyone else telling this story. I feel called to tell my own story. And so she had given permission for me to share it, but then she rescinded that permission. And I thought, what a wonderful full circle moment that you would be saying this advocacy and on your own behalf. And so I appreciated both her braveness, her bravery to share her story, and then her decision to have that story be her own.
Well, and that she knew the integrity of the organization, that she could even request such a thing
Yes.
and have that be honored is quite the testimony itself about the work of the organization.
Yeah, I've always respected that about their work. Now they are lawyers, and I mean that is their that's their field. That they're like, yeah, no, you can't just do that. You can't just talk like that. So it was, yeah, a good lesson in like I need to be thoughtful about this, and I appreciate that thoughtfulness. Yeah.
Well, we do want to talk about the song that you did want to talk about. The song is Deal Breaker from your most recent album. After you acquiesced to this request to like, okay, I will talk about a song. What was it about Deal Breaker that made you say this is going to be the one I'm willing to offer up?
Well, and again, I want to say I'm not trying to like build a mystery or be, some kind of, oh, I have all these songs that I'm not going to tell you about. Because I do share pretty openly. So when you asked, and I'm glad you're giving me a moment to say this as well. When you asked, there's several areas I could delve into, like writing It's Me about one of the worst arguments I've ever had with Troy. Troy I asked his permission, and he let me put a lot of songs out about our marriage. And he's confident that way. I'll tell you that he eggs me on. He wants me to share Roll to the Middle. He's the one who said that's got to be on that album. So he encourages me that way to really songs that are inspired by our like sort of dance and conflict. He'll encourage me to share that. And then I Feel the Love Between Us. The ones about the ways that we are deeply connected. So I appreciate that freedom that he's given me in that realm. And I hear back from a lot of people that level of openness does speak to them. And then I've spoken a lot about depression in my journey with mental health. That was very hard to write about. When I went to write about it, I had to deal with how much shame I had around my journey with depression, especially. And it was just as therapeutic as the record sounds for me to name all these things in it. So yeah, have been many things that have been like kind of hard to work through, and in working through them, they've been my therapy. The reason I picked this one is because it's more current to where I'm at right now, and it was a whole journey. It started out as a very angry song. I was venting something about a sense of betrayal, I guess, and it's just really speaking to like the divisions that are happening nationally at, politically at a national level come right down to our kitchen tables. And I don't know a person that isn't touched by it, And so, we have these relationships, and I am a bridge builder. Troy is more, he's a bit more combative. Like, he's an 8 on the Enneagram, an activator, a world changer. For a while there, he was like having street fights on Facebook, with, with family members and old, and like Sunday school teachers and stuff like that. So, and then in his own due course, he kind of like, you know what, the kids are watching me, and I, he had his own sort of moment where he was like, I don't know that this is beneficial. So I have convictions, but I also am very much, have always been not just a bridge builder. I think, but the working title for the book that I haven't written yet would be, I can see how you get there, because I can see how you get there. I have, it sometimes it makes me feel like, am I a coward that I don't, have more of a voice about this thing or that thing? But I really think the hill I die on is that if we've lost the humanity of each other, if we've lost sight of each other's humanity, then we've lost the whole plot. We really have lost the plot line. And how do I negotiate talking about our shared humanity and our imago Dei, our image bearerness? How do I keep that in front of us, where the conversations that we have feel so much of like the symptoms of the deeper disease, the deeper illness, and that would be in Exodus, the plague of darkness that covers Egypt. The Hebrew word for that, it says basically the interpretation of I can't remember which plague it was, but the plague of darkness, it says a man could not see his brother could not see his brother. And I think that is a darkness that besets us, and that we cannot see each other. And I think that maybe one of the most difficult things, or the way that we would name the sin of each other, the way that we would call out, each other's sort of failings and things. The failings, we have the names, and they're plentiful. But I would say, have we thought about the sin of not seeing our brother and then not seeing God? I think when you lose sight of the maker, and then those that are made in his image, that is just egregious. And so to me, I started this song in the space of conviction of like, I need to voice how betrayed I feel by you, that this relationship, and this is about someone in my life actually, but that was when I moved to Minnesota. I only knew Troy. I didn't know anyone else. I didn't have a friend in the world. I moved from Missouri, got married, moved up here. And if Troy and I had a fight, I didn't have anybody else in the world. And God brought a number of people into my life, friends and whatever. That there was a person that was really close to me, like a second mother to me. The divisions of late have, created a wedge. And I think that one hurts a lot because I just can't believe the content of the wedge. I just can't believe really this is the thing. This is the stuff of our chasm. I see it. I just don't. It's a mystery to me that there wouldn't be maybe a curiosity or a longing to understand where I'm coming from, or At first, I was angry. I felt betrayed, and I was like on this little bit like Troy, like spoiling for a fight. And I think in the process of writing the song, there was so much grief. I think Troy tends to like anger, and I don't know, like this is different personalities. Not anger. He's definitely not an angry person. He's actually very thoughtful person. But, he doesn't, he's like, I don't care. He can move on, and for me, a lot of that conflict takes the form of grief. And so I started out in like this anger, this hurt, and I was going to name names. And, it was kind of, the song had kind of like a a sass to it, like a real twisting of the, the knife. And then as I wrote it, I was reckoning with, I'm just so sad. Like, this absolutely grieves me that I would be looked upon with suspicion by people that I've, because I have this opinion or carry, whatever. And that some of my like work via like social justice would be read as like, with disdain. And, it just was, I had such a sense like, where am I? What is this? And then how do I combat this? How do I steer clear of culture war and stay engaged in culture care, which is the whole, like, add to the beauty. And that's the premise of my life, is we've been invited into the renewal of all things. Like, God cares about water systems and foster care systems and everything. And we're invited to bring the whole of our imagination to bear on those things. And so Art House North, that we run art community center here in St. Paul, our whole thing, creative community for the common good, is predicated on this invitation to be a part of the renewal of all things. And to be a part of culture care and not culture war, because that puts you in a stance of weaponized, apologetics, weaponized, faith, where you're constantly in a defensive stance. And so I've let the words of, like, here on, in the land of the living, Charlie Peacock, Makoto Fujimura, and others, their language around the generative life have really shaped who I am and what I'm doing here. And so it felt like a real breaking of that sort of, to be looked on with suspicion when I've been kind of like this. I think I'm doing the same thing I've always done. But then certain words and language are triggering these disparate responses. I had overwhelming grief by the end of it. And I felt really glad, in the same way that the song He's Always Been Faithful started out as a really kind of rant to God, a real angry song, and like, where are you? And then God challenged me and said, if you could flip through like a Rolodex of your life and pick a story where the great gift of his presence, wasn't true. And in hindsight, couldn't see that he had been with me. Then, and he's obviously let me write lots of doubting songs. I've written songs about doubt, all throughout. But that one, I felt arrested and stopped. If you can find one right now, he let me write this song saying, all I have need of, your hand will provide, before I saw that come to fruition. And I felt the same way about this one at Deal Breaker, that I was sort of, I'm singing aspirationally about my hope. It ends up being a hopeful song, even though it's about absolutely like broken relationships. It ends up being a hopeful song and a vision for Jubilee, and a vision for us to see give each other the benefit of the doubt, and so this record didn't, I feel like I put it on a conveyor belt in 2022. I like released it. I didn't have a lot of bandwidth to like promote it. I just literally, I put it out. I felt like it was on a conveyor belt, and it just like disappeared. And, but I feel like with any music, you just put it out and hope. I hope people hear that, and they understand like that it might also be helpful and useful in that place of their grief and their, anger, maybe sense of betrayal and frustration.
By the way, when you say you said it on a conveyor belt, it just disappeared. Is that because of the pandemic and kind of where we were all at, where the business was at?
I've been all this time, I'm on a label, but it's I'm very for all intents and purposes, I'm pretty independent. And I have been for some time, because the label is really, their work is still tied to Christian radio. And I haven't been really tied to Christian radio. I think Jeff Mosley, the president of Fair Trade, has done me a favor, and been like championed me and kept me in that system of like a labeled artist, as far as like how I deliver music to Apple Music and things like that. But I'm really an independent label that he does marketing and distribution for, so because I'm really an indie artist in that sense, even though I am signed with, I have some label amenities. I honestly, I put the record out, and I went and I had experienced another bout of depression. I think it was just the making of it and all that. I didn't have any bandwidth to release it and, whatever. It just almost came out in the one day. And then I didn't even have the energy to like talk about it. So it was just where I was at. It was everything. It was post pandemic. I had produced the record for the first time. I did it myself, and it was just quite a mountain to climb. And so I just sort of like, I feel like I got right across the finish line, and that was all I had, So, and I just have felt like, I think like I have really all along my whole career. I feel like God's kindness to me is like, not everyone will get what you're doing, but there are ears, and they'll find it, and that will happen. So I'm not complaining about it. I'm just observing, like, it was just sort of, that's how it felt. And that's how, the numbers bear out that it's just, not been as listened to. But I feel like the record it was me working through the moment we're in, what we're doing, and wrestling with all of it. But again, that's not like sour grapes on my part. It's I didn't have the energy to do it, so it was on me.
Within this song, I just love this song. It's even could be applicable into a number of situations if you wanted to read it through certain lenses. So it's good to kind of know the lens that you were viewing it through. Can you take me into, like, do you remember writing this? I guess I just want to read this for people who aren't, I mean, well, people can hear it in a second. But you wrote, "There's grief like a blackbird ever present in the sky, and I can feel all our distance and the hidden reasons why. But some days I can see us, and we're soft and reconciled." One, just the word, but the use of soft there is so impactful in this wonderful way, and the imagery there. Do you remember writing that? That was that. Did that come at the end? Was that a centerpiece from the beginning? Was that difficult to write? I guess within the song itself, I'd love to know about that stanza.
That was the pivot from anger to grief. That was the pivot. And I actually had a whole version of this written with a more, an angry. I actually tried to find it, Matt, and I couldn't find it, but it was just like sassier, angrier. The music was, it was just more dark and brooding. I mean, this is a pretty dark and brooding song, but it was when I always feel like the bridge is the thesis or the hands on the face. It's when I take your face in my hands and I say, this is the thesis. It's not so on the nose as that, but to say in songwriting, I think, and I've always just loved this about poetry and anything, Mary Oliver, whoever's writing, when you're working in the macro and then you take the micro, or vice versa, where you're in the micro and then all of a sudden you get a macro view. That, to me, that's sort of the role of the bridge, is usually in juxtaposition of the rest of the song. And so, yeah, so earlier I'm saying kind of like the business end of it, it's like we're trying to decide what we can abide. David Dark talks about we are what we abide. And that kind of sits in my heart some days where I think, oh, am I not railing enough against them, the things that I have convictions about. But we're all doing it. I look at my friends and I know that when I'm with them, they're also looking at me and going, how much of you and what you're bringing to this friendship can I abide? We're both holding our tongues, and we're both trying to occasionally, like, venturing out to speak our minds. So it's kind of like that's the business end of it. And then at the bridge, I really get to the heart of it. It's like, ultimately, I'm sad. Like, I feel this sadness daily. It's not I didn't just like stop talking to you, like, I see that we're not talking, and that isn't something I'm okay with. It is a dark shadow in my day, and then I can feel it. I understand how we got here, and I have a dream for us, and it's just that aspirational. So that is the pivot. That is the fulcrum of pivoting from, like, is there a way? I'm at the beginning. Someone asked me, is this when you say, hey, at the very top of the song, hey, can you picture us on the other side? Of course, they thought it was heaven. And I was like, no, it's not heaven. This first stanza is inspired by the World War One Silent Night, the truce on the front lines of World War One, when the soldiers on Christmas Eve started singing Silent Night. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
It's a beautiful story they made a movie about it called Joyeux Noël, but it was on the front line in France. No man's land is that space between the two trenches, and there was a spot where the trenches are particularly close, where someone began singing Silent Night on Christmas Eve, and the other side began singing as well. They come out of the trenches. They play football. They have in an evening of, they basically declare a ceasefire for a set the story's been told, a lot of different ways. There's a group called Cantus, a men's tenor group that does a sung version of the Silent Night. It's just beautiful. But that was the image I had in my mind. Can we envision ourselves? Do you have a vision of us past this with all this wreckage around us? Can we do this? Could we call ceasefire and like come up, and what are we doing? Are we actually shaking hands and patting each other on the back? Like, is it like, can you believe that? Whoa, it's all now, it's behind us. So in the bridge, I'm saying, like, I can see it. I can see us. So at the beginning, I'm actually asking the question, can you see us? And in the bridge, I'm saying, I can see us. I don't know how we get there, but I can just picture us being tender again.
I love that. It ends with what you mentioned earlier, this dream of Jubilee. As you've put this song out there, I know that you said the numbers bear it out that it's not maybe as popular of an album, and then consequently the songs haven't gotten as much attention. And it's not like you've toured this song for years and years and years and closed every show with it or something. But I do wonder, for those who have heard it, for those who you have interacted with, it makes me wonder, like, as you put this out, are you finding that people resonate with, I feel that grief too, I've been wondering this too?
Yeah, probably more than any song on this record. People are drawn to this song.
Really?
Yeah. And I think it speaks to the moment we're in.
And other people feel that same difficulty even to hold out?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. It's very close to the heart. It's not like the fallout isn't happening with some distant person that you kind of saw once a year. It's happening in our families and people that are really close to us. I was just at a family funeral, and of course it's wonderful. I mean, being together is wonderful. I actually had a couple funerals this fall, and I've been with a lot of family, and the views range just as broadly as it gets. And it was actually really encouraging and beautiful to be at these events, and for us to sit around the table and have, break bread together and just have wonderful times of sharing memories and seeing each other, meeting each other in our spaces of love and care for each other, instead of kind of the more snipey spaces we can find ourselves in, where we're like getting our comment out there, or, going online. And again, of course, I'm talking about being online, but yeah, it was really encouraging to me, and a reinforcement that being in person really matters. And caring and being curious are always better than, quick judgment and dismissal.
I love that all this was made possible by your willingness to write the song, but then not leave it as it was. But like, you said there was this other version. Now you can't even find it.
Yeah.
And then now we're talking about this finished product together. I just love that journey, and you trusted that journey. I think that's pretty great.
Yeah, I'm glad I can't find the other version. That's true.
Maybe it'll be like a remix, like Sarah's Sassy remix album, something that comes out, like twisted versions of other songs.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, we'd love for you to take us into the song, and maybe anything else you'd want to add, or whatever you want to say about it.
Yeah, well, I hope this brings peace to somebody's heart who's maybe experiencing having a deal breaker conversation with someone you love. This is Deal Breaker from What Makes It Through by Sara Groves.
Hey, can you picture us on the other side, with detritus and wreckage far and wide? And are we crossing over no man's land? Are we patting backs and shaking hands? And I always thought with you and me, though it's not on paper, there would never be a deal breaker. deciding what we can abide, holding our tongues and speaking our minds. We're living out our daily liturgies, praying in our different dreams. And I always thought with you and me, though it's not on paper, there would never be a deal breaker. And there's grief like a blackbird, ever present in the sky. And I can feel all our distance and the hidden reasons why. But some days I can see us, and we're soft and reconciled. Last night I dreamt we walked the riverbed. Listen closely for what's not been said. Last night I dreamt of Jubilee, new beginnings as far as the eye can see.
You've been listening to The Deepest Cut, part of the Rabbit Room Podcast Network. Audio production and theme music by Isaac Vining. Logo and identity work by Meg Cook. The Deepest Cut was created and hosted by me, Matt Connor. Thank you so much for listening.